everybody, it's Lyra from Lyra Gaming, where we cover looters, shooters, and RPGs. And today I'm really happy to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance. It is a new game coming out June 22nd. It's coming out for PlayStation, Xbox, PC, both on Epic Store as well as on Steam. And it is going to be part of the Xbox Game Pass, both on the Xbox as well as on the PC. Now, in this video, we're going to be looking at a variety of information on the game. So I'm going to be covering with you guys what Dark Alliance is, which you're seeing here on screen right now. Also, what it is not, very importantly. We're going to be looking at the game size information, playable character overviews, including character feats and move examples, gameplay, and loot. We're going to talk a little bit on crafting. We're going to talk about end game and difficulty options. And then finally, we're going to touch base on DLC and future content plans for this game. Now, if you are new to my videos, do note that they're quite extensive. Now, fortunately, for your convenience, in the description below, you're going to find extensive timestamps so you can jump around to wherever you want to go within the video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and let's take a look at Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance. All right, we've already started to take a quick look at what Dungeons and Dragons Dark Alliance is, but I did want to take a quick moment to mention what it is not, because there has been some confusion about this even in my Discord channel when I told somebody to look up this game and they ran into this game. So Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, similar name, different game, came out over 20 years ago. It even had a sequel and is a way different game, as you're going to see in the footage down below. Basically, these three games, outside of, I guess you could call the latest one kind of a spiritual successor or connector, but there is no direct story continuation. The big similarities is that they are basically in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. Also, the older games were isometric action RPGs, very much like in the line of like Diablo 2, and closer to Diablo 2 than Diablo 3, obviously. They had loot, they had a story progression, linear campaign, and there was no real end game. There was no like Diablo 3, for example, introduced the kind of the deep dungeon dives and the progression where you could go repeat content that's more and more difficult to get better gear. This game did not have that. And so very traditional action RPG, very different. Now, what made this confusing is the fact that this game actually recently got re-released in 4K. So this wouldn't be a big issue if we were talking about, this game coming out 20 years ago and that was it. But the fact that it's recently released, if you do a search for Dark Alliance, you may actually come up on this game. I just want to take a quick moment to point that out. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and go right back to Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance coverage. All right, so now we talked about real quick about what the game is not. Well, let's take a quick look here of this footage of what it is. Well, first of all, much more modern. It is a third-person perspective looter shooter, well, looter slasher, I guess you could call it, or brawler, however you want. And technically, one of the characters is an archer, so you could treat her as kind of, if you want to play a more traditional looter shooter. But the idea is it's very action-based. It's all about getting loot, getting better loot, progressing. Now, there is a story, but the developers did go out and say that because this is a game, it's a game that's coming up for $40. It's not like a $7 game. The budget isn't quite as high as some of these other big budget games. So they had to decide, okay, are we going to focus really on the combat or more of the story? And they stated that they really wanted to focus on the combat loop, make it really addicting. So basically, this game is going to quite literally either live or die by the sword, depending how good the combat is. There are 4 characters that you can play as. Okay, it has online co-op, but do note it includes generational compatibility, meaning if you have a PS4, you'll be able to play with PS5. What it does not have cross-platform co-op. For example, Outriders, that recently they added that, and I think people are getting used to it. So you can't play PC versus Xbox versus PlayStation, or not versus, but together with, which is a little bit of a downer. Maybe they'll add that in the future. Who knows? Also, if you're into couch co-op, it is not going to be on the consoles available or in general available initially, but they're saying when one of the major expansions in the summer is going to come out, they're planning on adding that. So if you really want couch co-op, you will be able to do that in the future. Now, as you can kind of see here, the combat is very, very action packed, very visceral. And the gameplay loop is the best way I can explain it is very modular. So the way it's going to work is you're going to do your kind of tutorial mission, and then you're going to kind of unlock your base camp. And when you're in your base camp, you're going to be able to go and you're going to be able to talk to a merchant, sell items. There's going to be like a mission board. There's going to be a crafter. And in the mission board, there's going to be 21 initially different missions. Now, these missions, they're going to have multiple parts. They're like 2 or 3 parts. It looks like they take anywhere between 25 and 35, maybe 40 minutes to complete, depending on difficulty and your playstyle. And they're going to be repeatable as well. Now, going back to the co-op portion of this game, when people join you, they can be at a completely different part in the game than you, and you can jump into a mission and they can follow you. So there's going to be, if you can think about it, kind of little story arcs within each mission, and there's obviously an overall narrative. But this game, unlike some other games, is not going to be huge on this overflowing giant story. It's just, think of it, modular little missions with an overarching way of playing the game. Now you see in the background here a little bit of the loot system areas. Big thing for the developer, they also said no microtransactions, which is really, really big. Just a natural co-op experience. Now, next, let's take a look at the playable characters. We're going to look at the little overviews and a little bit of story on them, and then we're going to go and take a look at some videos of them in action, so you can get a feel on their individual move sets and play styles. So the main character of this game is Drist. After fleeing from his home, Drist now fights to protect Icewind Dale from the threat of the Crystal Shard. Drist wields 2 scimitars. With lightning quick ferocity, he can call on his Astral Panther, Gwynar, for devastating attacks. Now, he is a drow. And for those of you that don't know D&D, drow are like chaotic evil, very, very evil. They live in something called the Underdark, quite literally underground. Well, Driss decided to kind of go against his people, go against his order, and basically went above ground. And basically got the equivalent of excommunicated for doing that. And now he is a target of the drow. And he kind of goes on these adventures with these other companions that he meets. That's basically the very TLDR story in a nutshell. So this is Drist. The second character that you'll have access to choose from is going to be Wolfgar the Barbarian. After 5 years of imprisonment, Wolfgar learned there's more to life than the conflict of the Elk tribe. With his colossal hammer and thirst for adventure, the rugged barbarian with his venture will now venture headlong into danger and crush any foe who dares threaten his home. Then you have Caddy Bree. This is your kind of range specialist. A relentless optimist, Caddy Bree was raised by Brunor and the grumpy Battlehammer dwarves. With deadly accurate bow and arrow, Caddy Bree will see the Dale free from the forces that seek the shard. And finally, we have Brunor. Having lost his throne to the invasion of monsters seeking the crystal shard, Brunor now uses his axe and shield to plow through his enemies with ease, but that won't stop him from grumbling about it. So these are the first 4 characters. I do want to point out, and I'll mention this a little bit later in the DLC section, there will be additional playable characters that will be released in future DLC, but these are the first 4. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some footage of each of these in action so you can get a feel for some of their movesets, and I'll comment about that as we go. All right, so the first one we're going to look at is going to be Drist here. Really, really agile. You can look at him kind of like an assassin. But it's interesting. There's going to be a combination of light and heavy attacks, and then also directional. When you put different directional inputs, you'll be able to do different attacks, as you see here, like thousands things, etc. You're going to have area effect attacks, uh, like um, like these teleport attacks where you go in and AoE attack enemies. You can drop markings on the ground. In fact, Drist is said to have the most amount of moves and feats of anybody in the game, supposedly. The number that was thrown around is 50, a total of 50 moves plus feats that you unlock. And then you cannot pick them all, but you're going to be able to pick a certain amount to go on your mission. So this is going to give you build diversity in addition to the loot. And they use something called fluid combat, basically, as they call it. So you're going to be able to combine these different abilities naturally. Like here they said teleport stab plus far conjuring, dark portal, also, again, even though he looks like a melee specialist, he can summon do some magical attacks at range, and also he's going to be able to go ahead and summon his kind of pet panther. It's a summonable companion for range attacks, and his ultimate is also involving the panther, where he'll, for a certain amount of seconds, summon his panther and just going to wreak havoc on the whole battlefield. Very, very, very deadly. So that's him. Right. Next, we're going to be looking at the ranged focus class, Caddy Bree. She's basically a ranger, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have any melee moves. So as you can see here, especially her light attacks, she has these kind of fast-moving, sweeping attacks, even rising kicks, acrobatics. But really, her bread and butter is her range attack. She can kind of have a lot of mobility. She rolls backwards to get out of enemies' ways. She can do piercing attacks, AoE attacks. When it comes to shooting in the air and just having a bunch of arrows come down, or arrows that go straight out and spread out like a fan. So lots of support abilities for damage, but also she is the only one that I believe has a direct healing ability. So you can heal your party, which is nice because normally the main other way to heal is to use potions, and there are limited numbers of those. So she can really, really be a great support in addition to really good DPS. And again, you see some highlights here of her different possible combination. Now, I also wanted to pause for a moment because they showed, as part of the developer stream here, her move list. So you'll notice that even though this is in development, so this may change, but she's got a minimum of, it looks like 14 moves. And there will also be feats that will modify you. So again, the idea is if you combine your feats plus your moves, there'll be 40, or rather roughly around 50 different options you're going to be able to choose from, pick and choose from, to create your kind of move sets, as well as your feats that will customize your character. And here's an example of all of hers. Unfortunately, they don't really show what they each do, but you can kind of get an idea. Some of these, are clearly kind of multi-strike, etc. Some look like they're like piercing attacks. So they're going to give you a great amount of variety as you level up. All right, next we're going to be looking at the Grumpy Dwarf Brunar. So this is your tank. Shield, hammer, or rather axe here in this case. Very chunky attacks. Now, I do want to point out something when we're talking about it. Every character can block, and when you block, somebody hits you, you take less damage, and it takes some of your stamina away. What the developer stated is he is the only one that can basically be in a defensive stance and attack out of it. So almost like a very defensible counterattack. He also has abilities to kind of maintain aggro and kind of draw the attention of enemies. He does have some mobility options, like you just saw there, like a rolling move. His range attacks are really just kind of like leaps. Like here's like a shield slam with a forward movement to bridge the gap. But he's definitely going to be a much more of a close combat specialist, very rugged. His ultimate basically drops his giant AoE shield, and that AoE shield is going to, if you're fighting within it, you're going to be able to get massive defensive buffs. All right, last but not least, we have our Barbarian Wolfgar. So Wolfgar, obviously, he's a melee smasher. His attacks are very impactful. So his big thing is he can actually stun, knock down enemies. He's all about breaking the defenses of enemies. In fact, in one of the developer streams I watched, he's got an ability that if somebody's got a shield, it kind of latches onto him. And oh, spin to win. If you want spin to win, by the way, this is the guy for you. But he had an ability where he can kind of like latch onto a shield, and it looks like you can tear it off of enemies. Now he can also he has susceptibly good range. You know, you saw him throw his hammer. You saw him kind of slam the ground and do kind of like a seismic slam combo. But a big thing for him is just knocking down people, crowd control. And very importantly in this game, when you knock somebody down to the ground, any damage against them will be instant critical hits by you or your enemies. So not only are they not damaging you, but once you knock them to the ground, you're going to do a ton more damage to them. So that's a big, big deal. Now, before we move on from the character kind of overviews, I did want to show this other picture from their media gallery. This was kind of the interface for the feats and moves. So in the previous video, you notice feats and moves are on a different page. Here they have them on the same page. I do not know which one is newer. I'm going to probably guess the stream because it seems like it was more recent, but I don't know. But the point here is this gives you a better idea. You'll see he had 14 moves, the same exact number as the Ranger. But also you'll notice there's 3 categories of feats. So the Forge had 8 options you could unlock. The Hammer had 5. And the Anvil had 8. Now again, none of this is final, but I wanted to point out just the numbers and the kind of options that you're going to be able to unlock as you play with these characters. Okay, next we're going to be talking about the gameplay and loot system and just generally how this game plays. So what we're seeing here, the developers are showing off the base camp. So here, for example, you unlock the merchant where you can sell the loot that you don't want. This is also where you kind of meet up with all your companions, and it's going to change depending on the progress of the main player. So to the left here, they're about to show off the trophy section. So as you beat different bosses across the 21 different missions, and also some of the endgame elements I'll mention, you're going to unlock these trophies to kind of show off and, basically a way of showing off your EPing. So that's kind of a nice little cosmetic element to the game. Now, as they head down below, right after kind of again pointing out the merchant, we're going to be able to sell elements and potentially also buy certain elements. You're going to have this important loot chest. I want to pause on this for a quick second because unlike many action RPGs or RPGs, when you get loot, whether it's from chests for defeating monsters, it's not going to say broadsword +2 and you pick it up. The way it's going to work is it'll say like uncommon sword or uncommon or common or epic, you name it. And it's going to go into this loot chest. You're not going to be able to just stop in the middle and equip whatever you want to get. Now, some people may complain about that, but I'll tell you one thing from ages ago when I played co-op in games like this, whenever there was always at least one person in the party that when they got a new piece of loot, they just had to stop, take a look, compare it to the loot, see if they're going to equip it, and slow everybody down. And I'm going to tell you this much. If you'd never played with somebody like that, chances are you are that person, statistically speaking. So this helps speed up the game. I know it's a minor inconvenience. Outriders recently does this as well. You don't get your loot when you do the high-end timed expeditions till later. And it's something you get used to, and I actually quite like it. You still know what kind of rarity you're getting, just don't know the exact pieces of loot. So again, after the missions, you're going to come back, go here, check out your loot. So can everybody else. So you can, at the same time, go through your loot. And over here is going to be your mission kind of station. So as I mentioned, what we just passed there, the mission station allows you to pick what missions you're going to go on. There's going to be 21 of them. You can farm them repeatedly on different difficulties, etc. And then what they are in front of here is the archery range. You can kind of practice your abilities, test them out. As you can see, kind of it tests how many hits. Now notice here in the upper left-hand corner, blocked a little bit by my camera, but you have your stamina bar and your hit point bar. Your stamina bar, as you use abilities, as you block, for example, you're going to be losing your stamina. you're going to be able to recover it in a couple of different ways, including short resting, as we'll see in the mission in a moment. But stamina is very, very important. You run out of stamina, you really can't do those special abilities. So this is kind of the overview of the base camp. Now they're going to show the mission. Here are the missions that have been unlocked. It even tells you if you haven't unlocked them, what is going to happen. And you know what? I'm going to go back really quick here to kind of show you a cool little element. So here it shows again, unlock condition for the tutorial. You must be offline. Obviously, you do that one time. And other ones will tell you what missions you got to complete to unlock them, for example. And then like here, Companion of Icewind Dale, it tells you what's kind of interesting. They have preferred gear set drops. So this confirms that there are targeted, you can target farm loot, which is really nice. If you're going for a specific build, you can go and run certain dungeons. And it also tells you, it shows here how they have multiple acts. So this one here, for example, is going to have 3 different acts that you can do of this mission. So you'll notice here, it has your different difficulty ratings. And this is big. This is very, very important. So there are going to be 6 difficulty ratings, and they're going to allow you to get better results, whether it's materials, XP, gold, how many pieces of guaranteed loot, and the item ranking range. So rank is kind of the tiers of loot, not necessarily like common, uncommon, legendary. There's literally 6 kind of difficulty tiers, and within each tier you can have the different rarities, if that makes sense. So, and it's based on how difficult of a rating you get. Your gear will have a combat score, and notice here it says party combat power. It collects it, and then it tells you, okay, your party combat power is 965. The difficulty for this is 900. Okay, you could probably do this. And the next one's pushing it, and obviously anything below that is going to be more and more difficult, relatively speaking. So this does also mean you could have a couple players that are really high power, and you could kind of carry somebody that's lower power. And this gives you kind of an estimate of how easy or hard it is going to be to complete. And now we're going to go ahead in just a second, and we're going to go ahead and jump to the actual mission. As you can see here, they're going to get started on it. There's the starting countdown clock. Very, very kind of traditional kind of mission meetup. And you're going to load into the mission. And we're going to take a quick look here. It has a little cinematic for it. I'm going to skip this really quick just so we can show what this what the levels kind of look at. So what's also important when it comes to this gameplay system is you're going to have, breakable items. You're going to have chests scattered around that you can collect. And notice there it says you got the gold kind of currency, 1 elixir of cleansing. You're going to have different elixirs, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. They're limited in amounts, and they can heal, they can get rid of debuffs, etc. Here, obviously, it looks like he's like kind of mining for materials, getting common crystals. Now, in addition to having kind of the linear path through the missions, the developers have mentioned that to kind of get all the loots and the kind of hidden treasure troves, you're gonna want to and have the ability to go off the beaten paths. So there is a little bit more openness to these levels. So while there is a fastest route that you can go through to just beat the game or the missions, you can go off the beaten path, and oftentimes that's where they're gonna hide the extra loot. As you can see here, if you drop down, your partners can come and help you out. Now, also, I don't know if you noticed, but there was kind of like a cold rating. So right now you're next to this flaming sword, and this will heat you up, and it will give you a temporary resistance to frost effects. And I believe they were talking, if you stay in the cold too long, you start taking damage, stamina damage, and I also believe health damage. So in this mission in particular, which kind of makes sense because this all takes place in Icewind Dale. And Icewind Dale is a very, very, very cold part of the world, as the name would kind of imply. You kind of want to make sure you get to these flaming swords so that you can kind of heat up. So that is, in a way, I don't want to say like necessarily a time limit, but it kind of is. If you take too long, you start to freeze, and that's never, never good. and you can kind of see lots of updates on the corner on the right or on the right side of the kind of loots you've gathered so far. When it comes to monster encounters, you're going to see kind of normally a combination of couple small monsters, and then you're going to have um, normally like one or two bigger monsters. Now, in addition to the individual moves, and they don't really show it off too much here, but you can also do combo or team attacks. So you can initiate special combos that only basically activate when other people join you for attacks, which sounds really, really cool. Also, notice here it talks about short rest available. Now, this is really, really big. Um, if you choose to rest, and I want to show that little interface there, there's a trade-off. So let's take a look. So if you rest, you're going to get your resources back. You're going to get your health back. You're going to get your stamina back. But if you choose not to rest, it's going to, for the next area, increase the rarity of loot. So, for example, if keep kicking butt and you don't really need to rest, you don't need to heal up, you can keep skipping the rest, which, increases the likelihood you may fail. But you are at the same time increasing the chance that you're going to get better and better loot. And I'm sure at endgame, you're going to be min-maxing to try and do runs on the highest difficulties without resting at all, for example, to increase the chances for your, legendary loots as well as sets. Now, speaking of the loot system, I do also want to point out the developers did say there's basically 8 slots where you can get loot, and loots are all called kind of runes, I believe the terminology used for it. Okay. Now, there are sets in the game that from the developer kind of interview basically said that you can get up to an 8 set bonus. So basically, there are sets that you could technically take up all 8 slots and you will get 3 tiers of bonuses, meaning at 3, at 5, and at 8. Now, this basically means that you can mix and match sets. So, for example, you can have one set where you have the 3 and 5 piece bonus. So you have 5 pieces of one set. And then you can get 3 pieces of another set and they get their 3-piece bonus, as opposed to an 8-piece bonus of one set. So that's just one idea. But again, sets are just one option. There's of course going to be just legendary, straight up unique items. There's also going to be like epic, uncommon, common, and so forth. On the lower difficulties, obviously, way less likely to get the epic or legendary or set items. Now, they also talked about crafting a little bit, and I want to point out that crafting, you're going to basically use materials that you get to upgrade items. You're not going to craft items from scratch, so it's really an upgrade system. So if you have a piece of loot that you like, or potentially if you have a set item or a legendary piece of loot that you get at a slightly lower level, because there are 20 levels of progression for your character initially. So you could basically, if you love that item, you can upgrade it and basically keep it throughout the game. So that's the main idea of the crafting. Now, they also did say that later on, they're going to potentially be adding, one of the options they may do is they may increase the level cap, for example. So that crafting system will be useful basically throughout the lifetime of this game. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here pertaining to the game and the progression is going to be end game and difficulties. I already kind of mentioned on the difficulties, there are 6 difficulties. And basically what end game will entail is once you basically beat all the main missions, you're going to have access to all 21 missions. You're going to be able to replay them on higher and higher difficulties. They also mentioned 2 specific end game bosses to begin with. So you'll be able to fight those for kind of high-end loot. And you're also going to be able to, again, repeat any of the 21 missions you've unlocked initially. And that's going to be a bit of the grind for the loots, for the gear. They push people. They say, we hope people play multiple characters, try them out because they have so many different abilities and play styles. But that's going to be the major grind. But that is not all because there's going to be DLC and future content, and let's take a look at that before we finish up. All right, so the final thing we're going to talk about is going to be the post-launch content. And here is basically the order of events. In summer of 2021, we're going to get free DLC 1, and that's going to add new levels, which is great because I have a feeling that's going to be one of the things that it can get stale after a little bit, just doing the only same 21 levels. I'm sure there'll be certain ones that people love to do and some they hate. Then there's going to be a second set of free DLC in the fall that's going to add new levels and new difficulty rankings. So again, pushing it beyond those initial 6 levels of difficulty and upping it. Then you're going to have the first expansion in fall of 2021 called Echoes of the Blood War. Now, if you buy the collector's edition, this is already included. Remember, this game is only $39.99. It's a bargain of a game, or it could be free for Game Pass. And I believe this expansion is about $20 or so. But what's great here, this is going to give a new playable character. And the hints have been that this is going to be a caster. So some people may have said, wait a minute, everybody seemed melee and range, but there were no casters of the initial 4. That is correct. I mean, Drist has some magic, kind of like attacks, but he's not a pure caster. So that's been the rumor as far as the 4th character or the 5th character. Also, more levels and more items. So it's going to progress the options that you have for your game as this goes on. And again, I'm going to assume that if the game sells well, this is going to continue on. And if it doesn't, it won't. But at the very least, we see here that you're going to have lots of opportunities for more and more levels, more characters. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this game will live or die by the sword. If the gameplay is fun, then this game will probably do pretty well. If the combat is too clunky, too boring, too vanilla, whatever it may be, then it's probably going to struggle because everything else looks like it has potential addictive qualities. The looting, the brawling, the upgrading system, playing in co-op. I will continue to make content for this. If you enjoy this content, please make sure to like and subscribe. Drop a comment below if you have any specific questions. Now, again, this information was based purely off of information I gathered on the internet and watching developer blogs, etc. I don't have early access currently. Maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. But worst case scenario, I will be playing this and probably streaming it at the very least at the beginning on twitch.tv/Leroy Gaming Stream and playing with my community. So make sure to join and check that out when this launches on June 22nd. Again, this is Leroy from Leroy Gaming, and I will see you guys in the next video.